Hello there. Welcome to this session on building emotionally intelligent applications using Azure AI. My name is Liji Thomas. I am a technical manager with Velorum Reply, and I'm happy to host you for this session. I hope you're enjoying the rest of the conference, and thank you for making time to join this session. So, a little introduction about myself. As I said, my name is Liji Thomas, and I work for a company called Velorum Reply. We are into digital transformation of cloud-driven enterprises, and we're based in Kansas City in the US. I've been in the industry in various technical and leadership roles for over 10 to 15 years now, and here's where you can find me. If you'd like to stay connected, please reach out in Twitter or in LinkedIn or GitHub. I'm happy to engage. So let's get started with today's session, which is all about emotionally driven applications. So it is said that a man has a property in his opinions and the free communication of them. And I think we'd all agree to that. Each one of us, especially in a modern world, we would stay entitled to our opinions and we would respect that of other human beings as well. It's interesting in our industry, in a business context, wherein we know that every day millions of consumers share their opinion on a range of things, including there's a lot of experiences, their personal experiences with products and services, feedbacks, review comments, etc. Most of this is very volunteered, right? So it contains very raw, very unsolicited opinions about the service or the product or a brand. Now, in a customer-centric culture, it's quite important, perhaps is more important now than ever, to make use of this data. And how we can make use of data is by making sense of this data. We need intelligent technologies that will make sense of this data, and it will extract insights about the customers, and so you can build strategies based on these insights. Inherently, all text is mineable. So organizations who realize this, who've understood the secret, they're at the forefront of customer experience and they're trying to make use of these techniques. So what we're trying to do is to tap into this universe of unstructured opinion data. And so the firms can find them, they can prioritize their customer interactions, and using which you can even improve retention and acquisition rates. So you tend to increase customer experience. How many of us have actually been in this situation whenever you get a customer feedback or when a customer review really comes in? How many of us really hide from that or kind of look for places to turn away, run away from? And it's not a very uncommon scenario, honestly. And every day we get feedback and reviews and opinions, maybe directly from the customers. And it's interesting because we have to kind of get into the nitty-gritty and kind of understand what those opinions are, making sense of those opinions. For example, one customer here who's reviewed a hotel has said that I love the hotel location but was disappointed that my room wasn't ready on arrival. I know she's a little, appears a little dramatic for that review, but then you get the idea. So it's quite intriguing, especially when reviews are very layered, when you have multiple sentiments and multiple opinions and a lot gets expressed in just one single paragraph, right? If it's a very straightforward positive or if it's very straightforward negative, when the person receiving the feedback kind of can make sense of that even better. But it gets tricky when it's layered like this. So I did an experiment recent time, a week back, and I posted the exact same line that you see here, the review comment. And I put it on LinkedIn and I asked the people what they thought about it, because in my understanding, humans are the best deciders of this. there isn't an algorithm that can do a better analysis than human themselves. So we asked the humans what they thought, and you can see the results on the poll. Some of them say that it's positive, some say you can't say for sure, most of them say it's negative. Overall, the kind of feedback that I've got from the results and from the comments speak to it, that it's quite tricky when, especially when the layered feedback arrives, when there's more than one sentiment or more than one things that is being discussed in opinions. So let's hold on to this thought for a second, and we come back to this problem statement, which I think would be the underlying theme for the entire session. But hold on to that thought. We'll come back to solving this specific problem statement in a while. But meanwhile, let me take you through some background and some valuable context before we get there, right into our tools. So parallelly, in another universe, let's discuss what's happening in the industry with these kinds of technologies. And what we're seeing right now on screen is really Gartner's emerging technologies and trends impact radar. It's a new visual from Gartner. If you've used to seeing Gartner's hype cycle, so this is a new visual that's come out from Gartner. And if you care to look at the radars that are outlining these technologies on the left side, it shows quite a few technologies, about 20 plus technologies that are mapped on this radar. And it shows that the farther you are from the radar, the more time it will take for this to come into action. Let's say the range is so and so. For example, the technologies that are in the yellow yoke right at the center are technologies that are relevant from any time now to the next 1 year or so. And the farther you go down around that radar, so it goes from 1 to 3 years, 3 to 6 years, 6 to 8 years, so on and so forth. Also, the size of those circles that represent these technologies are important. So if you look at the mass, certain circles are very solid, very deep blue, dark blue circles. And that means that the relevance and the importance of that is very high mass. And the smaller circles correspond to that appropriately. Let's zoom in a little, especially onto that yellow yoke there. And let's see what are those technologies that are that we need to sit up and take a look at. As I see deep learning neural networks, edge AI, low code application platform, and cloud AI developer services. That is our interest area for this specific session. Now, by cloud AI developer services, they mean cloud hosted services or models for developers to leverage AI via APIs, which means any developer can use these AI services using simple APIs. They can simply invoke APIs to call these AI models, and these AI services or models would be available for the developers. So this seems to be a very happening or emerging trend and technology that we need to sit up and take a look at, especially because the mass is high and it seems to be pretty relevant and happening in the next 0 to 1 year. And not surprisingly, a lot of giants have actually jumped on this bandwagon, and Microsoft is, you'd be interested to know that they've actually been revolutionizing this space for quite a while now. In fact, for over a couple of decades, if you've noted, Microsoft has invested a lot into the Microsoft research centers across the globe, to the point that today Microsoft has achieved human parity on a lot of services like speech recognition, machine translation, machine reading comprehension, conversational Q&A, and latest of which in late 2020 they accomplished was image captioning, which means now a machine can caption an image as good as a human can, right? So those are very powerful services, AI services coming out of Microsoft research centers. But the most beautiful part about this, if you care to observe, is not that it's restricted within their MSR centers. Microsoft has chosen to take these research outputs and infuse them into their own applications. So the current generation of Microsoft applications that we see and we use today on a daily basis, like Outlook and Explorer or PowerPoint. In fact, in using the PowerPoint to design this session deck, in fact, I used a couple of AI features and it pointed out a few design tips for me and so on and so forth. So if you use Excel and you see any of those AI services, now you know where they're coming from. Now, therefore, it is no surprise that Microsoft is today charted as one of the leaders in this space. So that's the Gartner's Magic Quadrant for Cloud AI Developer Services as of February 2021. If you note the top right corner, which is the quadrant for leaders, you will see that Microsoft is way above there, along with Google, IBM, and Amazon Web Services. So Microsoft has clearly made a path for itself in this area. Now, what that means for us, the developer community, is that Microsoft has not stopped with just putting these AI services into their own applications. They have followed the path of what's called democratizing these services, which means that these APIs are now available to the developer community, to you and I, so that we can use them in our applications to build such powerful applications. So we have at our disposal today what I'd like to call pre-built AI, right? So with little to basically no machine learning expertise, no data science skills, any developer can invoke these APIs. They can use this family of APIs and SDKs to create intelligent applications, and they are called Azure Cognitive Services. So simply put, what Azure Cognitive Services does is it gives a human side to your application. So if you're thinking Wall-E and of the like, you might want to check this out. So here's where the story starts with Azure Cognitive Services, right? So Azure Cognitive Services is Microsoft's offering around cloud AI developer services. We've got thus far. Now, deep dive into Azure Cognitive Services. Let's take a look at that spectrum there. Inside, we'll see that Azure Cognitive Service, or ACS, really has a number of branches and a couple of areas that it's focused on. We know that human intellectual capabilities, or the capabilities that make us humans intelligent, are basically centered around vision, speech, language, and decision. And those are the various subjects on which Azure Cognitive Services are also based upon. And under each of these areas, Azure Cognitive Services have got multiple APIs or offerings. For example, under vision, it's got computer vision, it's got face recognition, form recognition. Under speech, it's got speech recognition, translation, etc. Under language, it's got a couple of services. Decision, it's got a couple of services. So for the purpose of our session, again, we're going to be focusing on one specific area here, which is language service. And also, of the 5 language services, we're particularly interested in this one service, which is called text analytics. So we kind of understand that this is a huge area in terms of the amount of possibilities that are out there. From Azure Cognitive Services, of the various branches, we've come down to language services, and within language services, we are now deep diving into text analytics services. So text analytics contains those capabilities which will allow us to analyze text, to detect sentiment and key phrases. In fact, within text analytics alone, there are a couple of capabilities. So what a person can do is you can feed it text, and you can have key phrases extracted out of that text. You can have language detected by the API. The API will tell you what are the entities that it recognizes, and it will also tell you the sentiment associated with that text. So it analyzes sentiment. Again, we are particularly interested in that last topic there, which is sentiment analysis. We will look at a demo of this shortly, wherein we'll see quite a few of this in action. But just to talk about sentiment analysis, so this is that module which clearly brings out the sentiment associated with any piece of text that you provided. Now, it could be sentences, it could be a couple of sentences within an entire document you may provide it. What the API does is that it returns a confidence score, and that score can range anything from 0 to 1. And based on that range, based on the scores that are returned, the sentiment will be deciphered as either positive or negative or neutral, right? So that's as simple as how it is. So let's take a look at the demo here, and I can quickly shift my screen to show you a demo here. So this is the AI where I am is at aidemos.microsoft.com, and you can go here today and you can try this out yourself. And here you have a demo that is made by Microsoft themselves. You can test this API. And what I've written here is, now I've entered my own text. I'm at the Global Azure Conference 2021. There are amazing sessions and a great lineup of speakers. I'm going to provide that message there. Imagine that's a feedback that I provide at the end of the session, or you provide at the end of the session, and the organizers want to check what people are thinking about the conference, right? So first, what it does is that we see that it's identified a few key phrases, the ones that are highlighted in blue. And there's also a sentiment associated with that text. It says the sentiment is positive, obviously. It's a very positive phrase, isn't it? And because it's about 99%, it says clearly it is positive. And just like we discussed in the slides, there you can also understand entities. So it's linked entities with that. So entities meaning there are these keywords. The first round it identified key phrases or keywords. So in entities, it kind of ascertains which of these keywords are actually entities. So it can link it to Wikipedia, and you can get further information there. And this is outside text analytics, but just showing you the possibilities. You can even go on to do Bing entity search on that and hook that up with your applications if required. So that's how text analytics really works. Let's go back to our slides there. Cool. So sentiment analysis, as we saw, it's pretty straightforward. You're calling an API and will return your test confidence scores, which will put your text into one of those three buckets: positive, negative, neutral. Now, there's another thing that I need to tell you here. Typically, what happens in production scenarios is that you would not just give one single text. You'd have a list of strings, or you'd have perhaps an entire document that you'd like to pass on. Like, for example, at the end of any conference session, you want to feed the whole set of feedback to that, or you have an entire customer feedback document, or you have employee feedback that comes in. So you would have documents of these feedback. A very common question that gets asked is, if you have multiple sentiments within that document, like you have different sentences of different sentiments, different sentences of different sentiments, how does that document get scored? So at a very high level, you can obtain a document score itself, and this is how the document gets scored. If there is at least one positive sentence in the entire document, and considering that the rest of the sentences are neutral, the document would be labeled positive. If there's at least one negative sentence in that document, then the document would be labeled negative. Also, if the rest of the sentences are neutral. But if all the sentences in the document are neutral, the document gets labeled neutral. Now, here's the tricky part. If there's at least one negative sentence and at least one positive sentence in the document, there's a fourth label category called mixed. And this mixed is a label that gets returned only for documents. It does not happen in any other case. Typically for text of a sentences, you will get only positive, negative, and neutral. Only in the case of documents, you have a fourth category called mixed, and now you know why. Cool. So that's as much as for sentiment analysis. Now, there has been certain updates to sentiment analysis, and the versions that we were looking at thus far was sentiment analysis v3. So in v3 version, there was a lot of support for single and batch requests. You could provide scores and labeling, Docker support. But come v3.1, there has been an improvement with regards to the addition of a new feature called opinion mining. Now, opinion mining is particularly interesting to us, and we see how. Simply put, opinion mining, or there's another phrase for that, it's called aspect-based sentiment analysis, ABSA. It's the science of using text analysis to understand the drivers of public sentiments. I will repeat, it is the science of using text analysis to understand the drivers of public sentiment. If we care to think about our original problem statement, right? So where the customer said, I love the hotel location, but was disappointed my room wasn't ready on arrival. Now, there are multiple things that are being talked out about that. It could happen the same way about anything. You go to a restaurant and say, I like the food, but the service was pretty bad. I liked A, but then I had a problem with B. Right? So when you have multiple conflicts, you don't really know which direction to take in terms of how do you make sense of that opinion. It can get a little tricky to attach an overall sentiment to that. Now, what we need is to drill down to the drivers, understand not just what they feel, why certain behaviors occur. Traditionally, sentiment analysis has helped us understand how individuals feel about a subject, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. But here's the new kid on the block, opinion mining. It goes a step further. It explains why people feel the way they do. It tells you what is driving the sentiment. So which is why aspect-based sentiment analysis or opinion mining is very, very popular. It's very valuable in this aspect. It categorizes data by aspect and it identifies the sentiment attributed to each one. Instead of just saying overall it was positive emotion, it was a negative emotion, it attaches sentiments to each attribute therein. So before we jump into, and look at how do we actually mine the opinions, let's ask ourselves, why do we need to mine the opinions? I mean, do we really care about the opinions? Do we need to mine the opinions? Now, this can be applicable to multiple verticals. Not just a customer scenario. It can be applicable to any domain that you want to think about in a business environment, or even for public sector agencies. I kind of think about it. They might want to engage such techniques to precisely understand what are the areas of improvement, right? And let's see how. So first of all, if you're still asking yourself, do I need to mine the opinions? Do I need to mind it? First of all, individual opinions could reflect a broader viewpoint, right? So even a single customer who takes up an issue with a brand, over social media, they're reflecting the opinion of other people as well. So if you gather these opinions and you analyze them accurately, you can gauge the feelings of your audience. Secondly, knowing which battle to fight is very, very important. You cannot, play in the dark. You need to know which issue to target and why is key. Because only then can you actually go back to your customer journey and then precisely understand where you're succeeding and failing. More personalized content for audiences. This is interesting because typically organizations, they segment the market based on age or certain surface level statistics. But if they know how individuals are responding to that based on the NPS, they can personally brand their services, and they can have tailor-made experiences for users, based on how driven the users are. And these days, online networking is getting so expressive and emotive across multiple streams, and you have so much of data that's coming in. Even just internally, you have surveys, you have net promoter scores, you have CRM software. Externally, imagine social media, news articles, product reviews. Opinion mining can take all that data and it can provide broad insights across this gathered data. Speaking of which, I think given the sheer volume of mineable text that you will have today, you would definitely like to have help to carry out the large part of this deciphering work, because the volume of data is going to be really huge. And with the advancements in AI and ML capabilities, it will be much quicker to get results using these technologies. So those are some of the reasons why we might consider mining or minding the opinions. Now let's get to how do I go about mining opinions. So then I've decided that I want to do opinion mining, but then how do I go about this, right? So to obtain granular insights from data, what opinion mining must do, as we discussed, is it must assign sentiments to specific topics. So in our example, as we saw, where the customer said, I love the hotel location and I was disappointed my room wasn't ready on arrival. Apparently she pre-booked it, but for some reason it was not ready. It was not available. So in cases like that, it's important to understand which aspect is the customer talking about, because if we employed only sentiment analysis, the overall review would come out as maybe negative, and we would just count that as okay, so that here goes another one more negative review. Whereas if we carefully looked into the aspects, we would see that the location was really great. The customer liked the hotel location. But she said that the room was disappointing. So the room is the aspect that we need to work upon, and we need to focus on for the next time. So maybe work with the service team. So typically, let me tell you, this is how traditionally we would accomplish opinion mining, right? So opinion mining, it would use natural language processing techniques. There's a lot of work here. You need to take the sentence, you need to simplify the words. There's something called lemmatization, stemming. You need to analyze the grammar. There's parsing. You need to understand the contextual meaning of the word, etc., etc. It's a lot of work. But if you connect the dots now, thanks to Azure AI's democratized capabilities, developers can get started with opinion mining today. And before you ask, I tell you that it requires zero machine learning expertise. So using certain text analytics client library and REST APIs, you can build applications to leverage these capabilities right now. So here's going back full circle to our initial problem statement. Now let's see how we can actually build this. This would be interesting. We can actually build any application. We can even test this out in a console application or a desktop application or a web application. I choose to actually build an emotionally intelligent chatbot. And that's because a conversational AI agent or a virtual assistant is a perfect use case for these kind of scenarios. Typically when you have a conversational agent that is front facing, that is interacting with the user, it will entertain the user's interactions, right? So the user is continuously interacting with the bot. Imagine the the user says something that is sad, that is upset, and the bot does not understand the emotion behind that. The bot would just very monotonously or very robotically go on speaking with the user. And that kind of affects the customer experience. On the other hand, if the bot really understood the user's emotions and the specifics of why the user is actually feeling the way he or she is feeling, the bot can immediately change course of action. Maybe it can even hand it over to a human agent and ask for help at the right time, right? So it's a hugely powerful capability. So if you're not familiar with building a bot or using bot framework, don't fret. This is a perfectly easy thing to do, and I can quickly show you how to do this in a demo. So let me quickly switch my screens to a desktop view. All right, so I'm going to start my Visual Studio, and this is VS 2019. You may use a VS IDE of your choice. And I've actually downloaded the bot templates, which is available for download online. And because I have downloaded them, I have a couple of bot templates here. So you see a lot of bot templates, just like you would create any console application or web application. You can create a bot application right from VS 2019. So there are a couple of templates here. You can choose the empty bot project or the eco bot project to start with. And I have, for the sake of time, just created the bot project for you. And I've added in some code as well. All the code that is being added is coming to this file here. Just one single file that I have to create. And this is there in my GitHub repository. If you'd like to take a look at the entire source code, this is there. And I will just walk you through this code as well in a moment. But before that, let's do one thing. Let's go into our Azure. This is all about Azure. Azure is the star of the show here. What we need to do is create one resource in Azure, just one single resource. So I'm in my Azure portal, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create, look for my text analytics resource. This is the resource that I want. So if you remember from our previous conversations, text analytics is one of those services or resources under language services of Azure Cognitive Services, right? So we're going to go ahead and create a text analytics resource. And this is going to take a while. So, which is why I have a text analytics resource that have created here already. And once the resource is created, please go to the keys and endpoints section. That's all. In the keys and endpoint section, you get access to the exact endpoint. Copy that endpoint, and you might want to copy one of those keys as well. So copy one key and the endpoint and come back to your source code. And this is what we need to connect to that resource. You need the credentials, which is the key, and you need the URI endpoint. I must say, for a production application, you might want to consider putting this in a key vault or so. This is just for demo purposes, and kindly do not use this way. So let me run you through the core areas of this code. If you can see my screen here, let's start with this one simple method. So I'm writing a method to do just the classic sentiment analysis, the one that we just saw a while back. And that method does all it does is it takes the client that we just created. So let me show you the client. So this is where the client is created using this endpoint, and using the credentials, I can create a text analytics client. And that client is then passed here in this method. And I'm passing the string, the input text as well. So if you see the text client, the text analytics client has got a method called analyze sentiment, which will take this input text. And what it does is it returns a document sentiment. And I'm calling this, and I'm invoking this in my method. Right. So here, this is just parsing through the result. The result of which is a document sentiment. I'm parsing through the sentences in that, and I'm trying to take out what is the sentiment, what is the positive score, negative score, and neutral score. So let's run this and let's see how it behaves. If you have experience with this, you know that you can download what's called a bot framework emulator. So there I have my bot that's running locally. You can even publish this inside Azure, but I'm good with this running locally for now. And here's my bot framework emulator. So this is also a standalone tool that I get to download online. And here my bot is up and running because it's connected to my localhost 3978. And let me try chatting with my bot. So let's say I want to, okay, let me take the exact verbiage that was used by the customer. So this is what the customer said. I loved the hotel location, but was disappointed my room wasn't ready on arrival. So let's see, the sentiment analysis, the classic sentiment analysis comes back and says that the sentiment is negative, obviously. So it returns a positive score of 0, negative score of 1, and neutral score is 0. So it's clearly a negative statement is what sentiment analysis is telling me. It gives me no further details, no further insights, right? That's all that it's giving me. Again, not super useful for us, because we might want to, especially this was a larger text, or imagine if it's a huge document, instead of just returning back one single label saying this was positive or negative, I'd like to know why was it positive, why was it negative. So let's go back to our code here for a second. I'm going to stop running. And so what we saw was the classic sentiment analysis. I'm going to comment that out. And I'm going to show you another piece of code. So this is again very simple. What it does is it takes the same client, just as it called it analyze sentiment previously. This is analyzing sentiment in a batch. Imagine you're going to send a batch of documents here. In the options bag, you have an option to include opinion mining. By default, this is false. So we have to make it a point to include opinion mining. Set it to true, and you will have this method actually return a result collection. So this is a collection of analyze sentiment result collection. And same like we did the previous case, because this can be a batch of documents. I actually parsing through a lot of this. But for the sake of brevity, I'm actually going to just give the single text, whatever the user is going to type in, that same text is what's going to go into this as well. But know that you can actually give in a document of sentences, and for each sentence you could actually get back the sentiment score for each sentence, also what the target reference is within that is. So this whole idea is just about parsing. Let me show you that in action so you can understand that better. But the crux of this, or the magic, actually appears in that one line of code that we just saw, which is include options. Right. So I'm going to start that, and I'm going to again say just the same this one, but this time instead of the classic sentiment analysis, I've included the option to opinion mining as well. Now let's see that. Great. So first of all, it says the traditional part. It says the sentiment is negative, and overall the sentence has got a negative score of 1, positive score of 0, neutral score of 0. That's what we got traditionally as well. But then it dives deeper. It gives me more richer context and better insights. It says the target, it has identified a target to be the hotel location. And it says the assessment for that is that it's loved. So there's a value of positive associated with hotel location. Another target it identified from that same sentence was room. And the assessment associated with that is that it's disappointing. And because it's disappointed, it's actually negative. Right? So within the same sentence itself, it's identified two attributes: hotel location and the assessment of loved, and the attribute of room and the assessment of disappointed. Now this is super helpful for me, because now I can go back and really understand not just what the customer feels, but why the customer feels what he or she feels. So that's helpful for me to improvise my systems and to better my services next time on. Right? So let's go back to our session. So that's how simple or how super useful these in fact, how easy it is to actually use these AI services, which would have otherwise taken us, sort of years to sort of build this up. But we now know the history of MSR centers and how Microsoft is actually democratizing these services for the developer community, so that we can use them to build really powerful applications like we have here. And as I said, this is available in my GitHub repo, so please feel free to check out the code and play around with it as well. Cool. So what's next? I must say that we're only scratching the surface here in terms of the possibilities of opinion mining. We've typically use that in terms of interpreting customer feedback, streamlining customer support, etc., etc. But there are certain nuances associated with this that we would need to be aware of, and I'd like to call out as well. I must say that opinion mining techniques, sentiment analysis techniques, they've been sort of improving over the years. Experts in this field have overcome many challenges associated with the understanding of the human language. But some challenges are relevant even today. Now, for example, if someone made a statement like "you're killing it," it's a slang, and you probably identify and understand what is meant by that. An urban speaker would. But a bot or an application that uses services as exists today would probably not be able to make complete understanding or context of what that is meant. And similarly, you have so many other examples. He said, you nailed it. It could possibly come back as a negative score. So there are some challenges that are relevant today, and it's just because how rich the human language is. Especially when you go into commercial applications, you'd understand that it's so very important to for the applications to respect and to understand industry jargon. So there's a lot of technical terms that will be associated with your specific domain, and if the application does not understand that, it could decipher the sentiment of the opinion falsely. Likewise, it must be sensitive to context, how well it understands humor, sarcasm, slang, innuendos, colloquialisms, figures of speech, etc. It's just so many things. It's just coming back to show us, how rich our human language really is. And apparently, machines are very confused by the very same things that make human language very lively and humorous, I must say. But otherwise, once we've actually nailed these, the opportunities for us in this regard is just really huge. If you want to think about this at a next level, for example, video analysis, to assess even spoken language. Think about it in a customer service center where even the smallest of changes in pitch or volume or tone, or even when there is a voice overlap, when speakers are interrupting each other, they're speaking over each other. So such voice overlaps can be actually captured. And if you start analyzing all of that, there's a lot that we can understand by that. But actually, even today, opinion mining can start looking at your video chats, if you'd like, and the transcripts of that to start making sense of it. So the possibilities are really huge and very promising, really endless, I must say. So we're kind of coming to the end of the session, and we're trying to wrap it up. And our closing thoughts on this, very interestingly, I happened to read this somewhere. It said that the greatest fear in the world is of the opinions of others. But if the customer is the king, there's very less that we can do that the king's opinions do matter. And so is in the case of any service industry, so to speak. Opinion mining is gaining traction as a very valuable tool to better customer experiences. It analyzes customer interactions at every level. So we know exactly what makes people tick and what causes churn. So these capabilities are now a part of Azure's AI as part of text analytics features. So using which you can pinpoint exactly what people like and what they dislike. So you know now not just what they feel, but why they feel what they feel. So that I think is a huge added advantage to our capabilities and our possibilities to build emotionally intelligent applications in the future that will respect customer sentiments and opinions as well. Cool. Thank you so much for your time and for your patience. I'm open to questions. And as always, feel free to please reach out to me in these channels, and I'd be happy to engage and answer your questions further. But otherwise, I hope you have a great session and a great conference moving ahead. And stay tuned for the next sessions as well. Thank you so much.